Farmers make progress on corn planting, and Congress makes progress on a new farm bill. You're watching NTV's Grow. Later on in the show, we will meet our Farm Youth of the Month and talk about genetically modified crops. But we start tonight with a look at planting. Now 43% of corn is in the ground. That compares to 89% last year. NTV's JoBeth DeVera has more.
Farmers are taking advantage of the break in wet spring weather.
One of the things that you learn in farming is that you never get the same year twice in a row.
So they rush to plant crops before the next round of rain.
The crops will respond to what they've got.
Farmer Dennis says residue corn crop like this from last year's crop actually helps this year's crop grow better because it protects it from heavy rains and high winds.
There are things that we can't control, and temperature changes are one of them.
However, Dennis says what he can control is the amount of help to get the job moving. His greatest desire?
We need more young people to come back to farming.
Getting the younger generation more involved in the industry.
We're at the changing of the guard. You look at doctors, you look at professors, you look at farmers. We're all getting older, and we need a new generation to pick up where we left off and to make it that much better.
26-year-old Isaac Cook is one of the young farmers on Dennis's crew. He says farming is a lucrative industry and doesn't plan on changing his ways.
It's been interesting. My wife is from the city, and so as she's been out here for a few years, she's like, well, you're going to work every day. And well, it's really not work. It's just the way of life and what we do, and we don't treat it as work.
And it's the younger generation that will carry on the fruits of labor for this flourishing industry.
The Senate has begun laying the groundwork for a massive new farm bill that could cut spending, but also create new subsidies for farmers. Both the Senate and House started work on the bill this week. The Senate bill calls for roughly $2.4 billion a year in cuts, while the House bill would save $4 billion out of about $100 billion annually. Those cuts include savings from across-the-board cuts that took effect this year. Farm groups from all sides of the political spectrum have been frustrated with Congress's failure to pass a farm bill. Senator Mike Johans has been working on that proposal. Here are his thoughts.
Well, I came into Tuesday's Ag Committee markup really wanting to vote for a farm bill. It's important to our ag producers. I know we have the ability to craft good farm policy. In fact, we did an excellent farm bill about a year ago. The bill was fiscally responsible. It promoted free market principles. It provided great risk management tools for our farmers in crop insurance. It was a good bill. It was the right bill at the right time. Unfortunately, this year's farm bill, which I didn't support in committee, was a different story. The bill contains market-distorting provisions that take ag policy, I believe, a step away from a free market system, kind of back to a 1980s style farm policy. Ultimately, that costs everybody. It costs farmers and lower prices, and it costs taxpayers. The bill also relies on too many budget gimmicks to hide the true cost, like double counting savings that were already booked, if you will, hiding $3 billion in payments just outside the budget window. You just never get away with those kinds of ploys in Nebraska. And finally, it leaves needed reforms and improvements on the table. This debate, though, I would emphasize, is really not over, and we still have an opportunity to deliver a good long-term farm bill. My hope is it will focus on risk management, crop insurance, and other needed reforms, which is exactly what Nebraska producers are asking me to do. So now it's up to the majority leader, Harry Reid, to allow an open amendment process. I hope he does. He did last time. Hopefully we can get some fixes made in the farm bill. I'll offer some amendments on the floor that I believe will improve the bill when the Senate debates it. My best guess today is we're going to turn to the Farm Bill next week, and we'll literally be debating the Farm Bill in the Senate probably starting Monday afternoon.
Meanwhile, Senator Deb Fischer finds unanimous support for an amendment to the Water Resources Development Act. Fisher says the bill will help change unnecessary regulations that would adversely impact American farmers. Specifically, the amendment deals with regulations for on-farm fuel tanks. The bipartisan amendment raises the exemption levels for fuel storage capacity to better reflect the spill risk and financial resources of farms. Farm policy is also up for debate at the state capitol with a proposal to change the structure of the Nebraska Corn Board. The Corn Board would no longer be a state agency. The measure was offered by Senator Tyson Larson of O'Neill. Supporters say it would free the board of government red tape, such as having to get bids to make even small purchases. And the board would move out of a state office building and possibly work more closely with other farm groups.
We have some opportunities to work with some other commodity groups and some other organizations that probably within the state confines we don't have the freedom and flexibility to do that. So there'll be some positives gained there.
The Corn Board is 100% checkoff funded, no state tax dollars. Although 4 years ago the governor tried to use Corn Board funds to help balance the budget. That couldn't happen again, and the board would be elected by corn producers instead of being appointed by the governor.
It allows us to be more accountable to the producers who pay the checkoff. We'll be just as accountable to the legislature.
But Senator Ernie Chambers disagrees on that point. He says the state would still be involved in collecting the checkoff on behalf of what would be a private board. He vowed to fight the bill, which has now stalled at the state capitol. Scientists at the University of Nebraska are experimenting with corn silage in cattle diets as a replacement for distillers' grains. Distillers' grains are a byproduct of ethanol production and have become an increasingly important element of cattle feed. The research, which partially replaced corn with the more economical corn silage, found that as corn silage increased, there was a slight increase in feed-to-gain ratio and a decrease in dry matter intake and average daily gain. Corn silage has been a staple of cattle diets, particularly in times of high corn prices, since it allows feeders to use the entire corn plant. Just as smartphones and social media have changed the way we communicate, technology fuels a revolution on the farm. Genetically modified crops are hailed by many as a modern marvel, but not everyone believes in using them on their farm. NTV's Natalie Tavidian has more.
I mean, for myself, this acre of ground behind me probably produces a minimum of twice as much corn per acre as it did 15 years ago, and that's largely due to the new technology that we're using.
Crops bred using modern technology have been planted on more than 1 billion acres of land across the globe. That's over the past 2 to 3 decades. Genetically modified organisms may be found in as much as 80% of processed foods, and they include corn, canola, cotton, and soy. Farmers have their reasons for using these advancements.
GMOs allow us to use less energy, go less times over the field, and still produce a good crop.
Some say genetically modified crops may have higher yields due to both breeding and biotechnology.
Crops can tolerate the drought a lot easier.
Farmers may pay more for seeds that will produce higher yields and reduce labor. But while some say the genetically modified crop reduces the environmental impact on land, not all agree.
I'm needed now, and I'm doing something that's really good, and it's good for everybody.
Farmers who opt out of using the GMO technology say they too are seeing an increasing demand for their product.
Like we're paying 50 cents a bushel more for our non-GMO grain.
But in the science of food, non-GMO farmers rely on a different style of technology.
No, we can't raise corn after corn year after year, just like we can't raise alfalfa year after year on the same ground for, 10 or 20 years, but it works good with the rotation and organic farming.
When it comes to growing more with less water, Nebraska is a world leader. Coming up after the break, we'll see just how far that Cornhusker influence extends.
I grew up on a farm my entire life. I was very active on the farm from a very young age, and it's just a way for me to express, how much I care about FFA and agriculture.